So I'm going to take you on a journey of about 20 years of Caffè Nero and Talent Bank, and a bit about how my life has turned from coffee into music. So a bit about my background. I don't know if you can see this, but my first degree was in nuclear physics, fairly useful at times. I then spent time working as a ski instructor, and so during the day I was a ski instructor. In the evening I played piano in a bar. That's the best job I ever had in my life. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that forever, and I ended up doing an MBA at this place, which is in Fontainebleau, France, which is INSEAD. That's quite important because actually some of the people I met here have were really important in the businesses that I helped develop. In fact, one of the guys I was at INSEAD with is now the Chief Executive Officer of PRS, which is really useful at times. So I was headhunted out of INSEAD, and I then spent 13 years in the chemical industry, which was a good career. I was well paid, and actually I ended up in mergers and acquisitions and bought a company, helped to buy a company in Germany, and ended up working 2.5 years in Nuremberg, which was great. And in those years, 13 years working in a declining industry and just one explosion, honestly. And then something happened. The company I was working for was taken over. They had 40,000 employees. They were taken over by an even bigger company. I ended up working in a company with 90,000 employees. And I felt that was too many, and I wanted to do something different. And our kids were coming up to school age. And at that point, my life just changed dramatically. And I was sitting in Germany, in Nuremberg, in my office, and my phone rang, and a friend from INSEAD was on the other end of the phone, and he said, "Pablo, you know about food, don't you?" That was the interview, the whole interview. I have 2 passions in life, 2 hobbies, one which is food, and the other which is music. I was actually the only person he knew who had an MBA and a commercial background and knew a lot about food. So we had been talking about why were there no coffee bars in the UK? If you go back to 1997, 98, there were no coffee bars in the UK. He had been brought up in America and in Germany and in France, so he'd seen the Starbucks explosion in America, but he'd also seen the coffee bar culture in Germany and France. I was brought up in England, France, Germany, Austria, so I knew the coffee culture, particularly from Austria, from Vienna, very, very strong coffee culture going back hundreds of years. And we couldn't understand why there were no coffee bars in the UK. That was it. I mean, that was our kind of business plan. There are no coffee bars. Of course, you have to ask. There are no coffee bars because people don't want coffee, or maybe there's this sort of huge latent demand out there for coffee. Anyway, in 97, 98, he rang me up and said, "Let's start a coffee bar." And at the same time, we bought 5 coffee bars. They were called Caffè Nero. They were in London. They had good coffee. They were badly run, and they had panini. And we bought these 5 coffee bars. And I agreed to go back from Germany and actually spend 12 weeks helping him sort of turn around these 5 coffee bars. I couldn't afford to do more than 12 weeks because I had to take a 75% pay cut in order to go and help sort of get Caffè Nero going. But that's what I did. I think if I show the next slide, how many people have never been to a Caffè Nero? Right. We do have a few. Okay, so this is what it looks like. It's a very well-known brand now, quite a strong brand, I'd say. If you see the blue, you see the Caffè Nero logo. I think everyone, certainly in the UK, would recognize that. And we started building up these 5 coffee bars from '98. Of course, it wasn't easy. We had some competition. If I show the next slide, I think you all know who our competition were. Actually, when we started in '98, Starbucks weren't in the UK, we thought that was great. Unfortunately, about 6 months after starting, Starbucks bought a company in the UK who had 50 coffee bars, actually in London. So overnight, we had 2 really powerful competitors. obviously Costa is part of Whitbread, a very big public company, and we had to find ways of sort of differentiating ourselves from the competitors. So how did we do that? First of all, we played and always have played very strongly on our Italian Mediterranean heritage. Starbucks is obviously American, Costa is a bit confused, so we had a very clear brand coming out of Italy. We had better food, and we had a great ambiance, and that's where coffee and music sort of joined up. Because when we started Caffè Nero, we were playing a lot of music, but we had very little control of it. But we felt that it was an important part of our brand. The difference between us and Costa and Starbucks, I think if you come into a Caffè Nero, you'll find that there's a certain warmth. That is made by the design, it's made by the teams that we train to kind of create this family atmosphere, and it's made by the music. Right from day one, we play music in every single Caffè Nero. And if you ever go into a Caffè Nero and the music isn't playing, it will feel flat. It's incredible. So in the morning, we play classical. We used to play opera, but I had too many complaints. I had to take the opera off. At 11:15, the classical music goes into classic jazz. I happen to love jazz, and I play a lot of the music which I love. And if you are in the UK, you should go and sit in the Caffè Nero at 10:30. And it's very calm, and it's very relaxed, and people are chilled out. And then at 11:15, Oscar Peterson Night Train comes on, and people's feet start tapping, and the whole place just changes. It's unbelievable how much difference the music makes to it's like a metronome suddenly gets faster, and the whole coffee bar starts to wake up, and it's incredible. It's like being in a different place. So that the jazz goes through till about 2 o'clock, and then in the afternoon we play acoustic, and we play a bit more pop, Americana, a very broad range of music, and that's what we've always done. We were helped enormously. In about 2001, 2002, we went from having CDs playing in store to having hard disk players on a computer. The point about that is that it allowed me to then control every single track, who was playing, when they were playing. And we developed a playlist of about 1,400 songs now, which we've curated from A to Z, and we know when they're playing and exactly what kind of music. And that's been very, very important, I think, to the way that the brand is now perceived in the market. And then at the same time, I started hanging out in a live music club called the Kashmir Club, an amazing live music club. I wasn't really familiar with live music, and I became a regular in this club, and I heard lots of amazing musicians, many of whom were unsigned, but they'd made CDs, and they used to give me their CDs and say, "Pablo, can you play our music in store?" By that time, we probably had 100 stores, and I did. So I started to play unsigned music in store. I then learnt about royalties. I didn't even know about royalties, and the reason they were so happy for me to play it in store is because they were obviously signed up with PRS, PPL, and they got their royalties. And that's sort of part of the background to Caffè Nero, was playing unsigned music. And then in about, I think a couple of years later, a young musician who I was playing on the sound system came up to me and said, "Pablo, do you mind if I play live? I'd like to do a tour of Caffè Nero." I thought, why would anyone want to play live in the coffee bar? He said, no, I really would like to do it. Historically, some very famous musicians, that's how they started their career. I think he was about 19 at the time, a young guy called Jack Savoretti. He's done okay. But he was the first guy ever to do a tour of Caffè Nero, and he played about 30 Neros. He loved it on the way around. He met lots of people. He could sell his EPs, his CDs, and that was really the start of quite a major music program within Caffè Nero. We now put on 500 to 600 live gigs in Caffè Nero every year. About 250 of those we put on one day together with Nordhoff Robbins. We do a huge charity day where we have 250 musicians playing at 12 o'clock simultaneously in 250 Cafe Neros. And we're doing the same thing this year. I'm one of the musicians, but then this year we're inviting a few very, very well-known musicians to play within the Cafe Neros, and we'll be raising money for Nordhoff Robbins. Of course, no one will know where they're playing, so that will create a lot of interest on social media. Of course, we now have grown from 5 coffee bars to about 870 coffee bars in 8 countries. So, I'm very, very happily spending a few £100,000 a year now with PRS PPL. All of that money goes back into the music industry. What a wonderful way to put money back into the music industry. If I went to my finance director and said, give me a few £100,000 to put into music, I think you know what would happen. So we are very, very happy to do that. We put on hundreds of gigs every year. Some of them do tours, some of them do individual gigs. We have a full-time stage at Heathrow. We have we put on 2 live gigs every week at Heathrow. We run songwriters competition, which we did together with Yamaha and Nordhoff Robbins. We run the Get Loud Day, 250 musicians playing on one day. And then we've started sponsoring festivals. And the best known festival that we sponsor is the Cornbury Festival. There you are, that's our stage at the Cornbury Festival. So we now take about 140 of our baristas to the festival. I have my own stage there. We put on 21 musicians, 21 bands actually, and we have a fantastic time. And obviously the musicians love playing Cornbury. Very, very difficult to get onto the main stages, but the Cafe Nero stage is known for having some of the best emerging artists around in the UK. And we typically get a crowd of between 50 and probably 400 people. And every year I always get 1 or 2 well-known musicians asking if they might be allowed to play on my stage, which is great. So we've had the Zombies on my stage, we've had Kiki D on my stage, Jack Savaretti obviously, and a few others. So it's become part of our brand and a very important part. Why do we do it? Well, we have fun. And that fun, I think, is transmitted to everything we do as a brand. Sure, we sell a lot of coffee, we sell a lot of panini, we're in business, we have to make money, but the music is part of the culture that we've built up around, I think, Cafe Nero. And I think if people, if you talk to people in the UK, what is their favorite coffee bar, a lot of people will say Cafe Nero because it's different. And one of the reasons we're different is because of the music. And if we look at that is our revenue up to 2011. And as you can see, it shows a pretty good upward curve. In fact, this year we're going to turn over about £350 million, and we're reasonably profitable. So we've done okay at the same time as helping a lot of musicians and having a lot of fun in the music industry. And then actually in 2007, we took the business private. We'd actually we'd launched it onto the stock market. We went public in 2001, and in 2007, we bought it back. We became a private company. And that's me in 2007 thinking, well, that's great because it's a liquidity event. What that means is that if we wanted to exit, we could. And we clearly, we knew what we were worth, which was wonderful at the time. In fact, I was pretty burnt out in 2007, and I was going to leave, but my chairman said, you can't go, what do you want to do? So I thought, great, I will carry on doing international development because we had just moved into Turkey, and he loved that because he wanted to develop internationally. I said I would carry on doing the music program, and he loved that because he knew what I'd been doing. And then I said to him I would work 2 days a week. He didn't love that. But anyway, he knew he had to accept it, so that's what I did. And I've now spent 10 years actually developing the international side of the business and developing the music program to where we are today. Clearly, I had lots of time on my hands. I was then getting more and more involved in the music industry, just sort of meeting musicians and thinking about, what else could we do, and trying to understand the music industry. What I've done actually is, after 20 years observing the music industry, I had some questions, and these are sort of the questions I've been asking myself for the last few years. Why do so few of our best musicians actually break through? I've worked with about 400 musicians in the last 15 years, of whom 2 have done really well, and maybe another 4 are probably just about making a living as writers or another part of the music industry. But among the musicians, there were definitely another 10 who were absolutely extraordinarily good and should have broken through, but they didn't. Why? Why does the music industry make itself so complex? I could never understand the complexity of the music industry. Whenever I asked someone, why is something done a certain way, the answer was always, because it's always been done that way, which for an entrepreneur is a sort of red rag to a bull, really. And then, why are major labels so bad at developing talent? A lot of the young musicians, not a lot, a few of the young musicians we worked with had signed deals. Actually, none of them went well. Most of them regretted signing with a major label. And I could never quite understand why that was. And then finally, outside of Caffè Nero, we put on a lot of gigs now, but the artists we're working with find it really difficult to get good paid gigs in London, particularly in London. And that was something else I could never understand. There's still venues in London who are making artists pay to play, which is appalling, but it's still going on. So putting all that together, I felt we had to do something about it. And last year, you probably can't see this slide completely, but I met a guy called Ray Jones. We were both on a panel judging a music competition, emerging talent, about 10 bands on stage, and we were judges. And after the competition, we got talking about why is the music industry so bad at developing young talent. He was running all the live events at Time Out for 5 years, so he knew a lot about he knew the venues, he knew a lot about the music industry, but neither of us could quite work out why the labels were not good at developing talent, and why the musicians were finding it hard to get gigs. The same time, I met the guy bottom left, who is Lord Mervyn Davies, who is an extraordinary guy. He came to see me because he was interested in what we're doing in Caffè Nero. He's a great entrepreneur. He's chairman of Standard Chartered and many other big businesses. But he came to talk to me about Caffè Nero. And while we were talking, we realized that we both had this sort of great passion for music. We ended up talking about music rather than coffee. And then finally, the top left picture is he gave a fundraising party for 400 people at the Royal Academy, at which he invited, who's that guy on the bottom right? Jamie Cullum. He invited Jamie Cullum to play for 400 people. And Jamie Cullum went on stage, played for 400 people. Halfway through his set, he said, who's going to come up on stage and play with me? I got up on stage. He didn't realize I played piano, but he found out quickly. We ended up playing together for about 10 minutes. I came off stage, and Mervyn just looked at me and he said, Pablo, we are going to start a music business together. Come to me next week and let's put together a business plan. A week later, I was in his office with Ray Jones, and we put together a business plan for a new music business, which is called Talent Bank, which is kind of an extension of Caffè Nero in the way that we're going to try and develop young musicians. And Talent Bank, very quickly, what do? We find talent. So we have networks out there now, which are built up over 15 years. Ray's built up over 5 years. We have lots of amazingly good musicians coming to us or being recommended to us. We find them. We put on live events all over London now using Ray's network. We put on we've been going for 10 weeks, I have to say. We launched it in January, and we're already putting on some amazing events, about 4 or 5 events a week in London. Well paid, with great crowds sort of appreciating our music. So we put on events, we help our artists develop. Most young artists, they need guidance, they need to be helped with their career, we do that. So really we're an incubator and an accelerator of talent. And what happens is we watch our artists over a while in the live arena, and the ones that we think are really, really exceptional, and the ones who really connect with their audience, we form a joint venture. I'm not allowed to use the word label. I'm not allowed to use the word sign up. We form joint ventures. And in fact, last week, 2 weeks ago, we formed our first joint venture. It's not public yet, but that guy on the right, Joe Slater, is now part of Talent Bank. And if I go on to say, why are we different? So it's all about live. We believe that a lot of development of emerging talent is about creating fantastic live events, so we do that. We're data-driven, and marketing is social media-centric. We don't spend £30,000 making videos. Joe Slater, the guy on the previous slide, he did a 9-minute live broadcast from his kitchen 2 weeks ago of him playing the guitar and singing. And within 2 hours, he had 12,000 views. That is the new world, and that's the kind of world that we are going to be working with and using to accelerate his career. We're very lean. We don't spend a lot of money. We create joint ventures with our artists, as I mentioned, which are transparent, 50-50s, 360-degree contracts, which enable our artists to build an income year by year. They don't get a big, money to start with, but they get money to live and come and spend time in London to be able to do their music. And we're very patient. We know it takes time. Part of our plan is that it shouldn't take 8 or 9 years, as it did with Jack. We think we can accelerate that. We can do it in 2 or 3 years. So it's very different. We are trying to change a bit the music industry. We're trying to create an environment in which emerging talent can come through and make a good career out of it. That's what we are. That's my food coffee to music recipe. That's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. Talent Bank, as I said, has only been going 10 weeks, but already there's some amazing things happening, and we're pretty confident that we can keep it going, and that I think in a few years' time, we will be one of a number of companies working in a similar way within the music industry. Thank you very much.